And 3 and 2. And giving YouTube a little bit more time to connect. Go ahead, land of YouTube. As soon as YouTube connects. All right, excellent, 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 excellent. I want to first and foremost say good evening, everyone. Good evening and God bless. It is with immense honor that I have the opportunity today to welcome someone who I've been following on social media for quite some time this year. And I've been, as a fan, as an onlooker, and as a supporter behind the scenes, just looking at your work and admiring that which you do for the community. I bring to you, family, none other than Selina Thomas. Selina, how are you doing?
Hi, fine. Thank you so much. That was so kind for you to say that. I appreciate you.
You're very, very welcome. So I want to ask you a brief question. But before I do that, I want you to kind of generalize us with a brief introduction of who is Selina Thomas? Who are you, essentially?
Sure, no problem. Selena Thomas is a entrepreneur. I live in Santa Clarita, California. I own my own HR company. It's human resources firm, and I started my company 6 years ago here in Santa Clarita as a support to other small businesses. And most recently, I had a run for city council to support those small businesses. That was really the antithesis of running, was because of the impact from the pandemic to many of my clients and of course our community. And so having never ever had political aspirations, I stepped forward to serve, and so that's primarily what you've been following.
That's
So I'm a
beautiful.
mother of three girls, and I'm very busy.
That's beautiful and that's powerful. Um, Tell us about your race for city council. What was the impetus or the driving force that made it so that you actually ran?
Sure, and it really was encouragement from a lot of my clients that were needing help and not having a resource to understand how they were going to get through the pandemic with their employees, their businesses, and that really was the catalyst.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And for those of us who are novices that don't understand what it takes to actually represent in a township or in a city on the council level, can you kind of describe for us what that job even entails?
Sure, and the process first, and excuse me, is that you actually have to be nominated by constituents um, to even get on the ballot. So having never
Okay.
been in the political arena except as an intern, I had to go through that process and be nominated. And once I reached that criteria, then I was able to be on the ballot. So that took a lot of effort. And of course, you know, it was another sort of um, level towards being visible as someone that wanted to serve. And so that in and of itself is an accomplishment. I was the first African American woman to be on a ballot here in Santa Clarita.
And kind of create for us because a lot of my listening audience is also on the East Coast. So if you can, give us an understanding of what your city is like. Um,
Sure.
in other words, being that we're so far away in the East Coast, when we think of California, we literally think of downtown LA. So allow us to take a ride through your eye view, your lens, and tell us about your city.
So I'm a suburb of Los Angeles, 45 miles north of Los Angeles. So not in the city, but very close. And a lot of commuters drive into Los Angeles. So there are a lot of people that work in Los Angeles. If you're familiar with Los Angeles, an hour from LAX, and so suburbia, the primarily is a mixed demographic. It's become that in the last 10 years that I've lived here, but it's still we are truly the minority, and so the mix is of middle class, upper middle class, suburban, and of course white collar workers.
That's beautiful. Um, one of the reasons why I thought it would be a beautiful opportunity to have you on the show is because one of the things that I've noticed as a young Black man living in America, and mind you, I just turned 41 in November, and I'll be 42 this coming year in 2021. So, I've been around the sun a couple times, and one of the things that I realize is that in our communities or in many urban communities, because of things that play out in the news media and in our communities, it's a tendency on Black people or Latinos to almost not really want to be involved in the political process because we don't really see ourselves painted in the bigger picture. But from my understanding, from my research, and from my application in the community, I've found that being involved in government at the local level is where we see change the most. So, can you kind of
You're
speak to
so
us
right.
about how is it that we can be involved in a local level and how that can help to alleviate some of the problematic issues that we may be having in our communities?
I think that's such a good point. And truly, the first part is to be present and visible, and to represent. A lot of people ask me through the entire campaign, why did I want to run? And it was really because I did not see representation of what I look like at city council level. But also having three daughters myself, understanding that I'm modeling, if there's an issue that you want changed and you have a platform and ability to do it, you need to present yourself. And so it's important to know too, as you pointed out, so many things happen at the city council level first that impacts you before anything at the federal level would impact you, from ordinances to, the manner in which um, the community is even divided. It happens at the city council level, so it's important to be engaged in that. And as a candidate, I can be completely honest that I wasn't aware of how much was uh, decided at that level until I became involved in the campaign. And now
Okay,
there's an
okay.
awakening.
So, right, right. If
Hmm.
if we want to rally for change in our urban communities and we want to see change on the local level, tell us from the best of your knowledge, what are some of the things that we can actually do to get in contact with, let's say, a city councilman or city councilwoman? How do we remove, as it were, that veil so that we can gain access and begin to place ourselves in these environments where we can begin to be counted at the table?
Representation at meetings. You have emails you can call. There's so much with social media now, and council people actually have a direct link to the community through social media now more than ever before. With the fact that we're all shuttered, most of the campaign that I did was virtual, and so now there is this new drive to communicate virtually. A lot of my campaign and the delivery of the platform and my issues that I was championing came from social media. So there there is now this new normal of communicating, just as you did with me, to have this opportunity to speak today. You reach out, and you reach out often, and you do so in a way that is articulate with a purpose. I think it's so important that message messages get lost in translation if you're not delivering it with a purpose. And I think that's part of why my campaign became so visible, because the messaging always had a purpose. Whether it was to deliver information to small businesses or to people, or just to give them hope. So you have to communicate with a purpose.
Okay. If you can now, tell us something about your show that you host.
So the Signal, which is our local paper, um, was very influential in my campaign. And once the campaign was over, we didn't get the result we wanted. There was still value in the message. And so they gave me an opportunity to host a podcast which is truly featuring small businesses. So weekly, I host different small businesses, feature what their issues are. We've had so many different um, impacts to certain industries that I highlight, which was part of my platform when I was running for city council. So it's biweekly.
Okay. 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 With that being said, one of the conversations that I think I personally entertain the most about politics is the idea that we can't complain about those issues that directly affect our community if we're not also actively or impactfully involved in the actual groundwork. You know, for instance, I have a city councilman joining us next week, Jules Jones from Detroit. He's the youngest city councilman ever, and he's also an
Oh,
African American
exciting.
per se, and that's going to be very, very exciting. And you know, one of the things that me and myself and him have dialogued with off the scenes is the fact that the more and more that we become the new face of politics, the more we have the ability to see that change. So I want you to speak
Absolutely.
to us about, you know, how much should we at some point begin to also see ourselves in these places? Because even though the statement is cliche, I still want to use it. They say you have to be the
Yes.
change that you want to see, right?
So
So
true.
if we take that
Yes.
literally, we should be running for these offices. We should be wanting to
Absolutely.
be more involved in governmental positions. Can you speak to us about that?
Yes, definitely. And taking the first step is from that statement of seeing something where you want to be, see the change. And again, we had so many very visible social issues that happened in 2020 that was just for all people to become involved in. We saw that when we saw the protests, and we saw more young white college age students engaged in the protests.
Yes.
And you see that movement, even for them as Generation X, to want to say, this stops with us. We're not going to carry kind of the social norms of racism into our generation. And that's why I think you saw more of them than you've ever seen before. And so being engaged in that and saying that it's not just for this one protest, that we have, to your point, a very young COC, College of the Canyons, board member. He's 2 years out of high school. He ran against um, someone who had been a significant fixture in our community, and well liked by me and many, and he won. To the council member that you just talked about, his story, because you see young people engaged, you see them using their vote for the voice of change. And so
Yes.
I think that you're going to see that movement in a lot of other elections. And I think when other young people see that, they're going to be encouraged and inspired to run. And I was encouraged by seeing this young man who um, had, did not have the means and the money to run up against, this heavily weighted ticket, that could easily, ride into the ballot with no problem. But he won, and it was very closely contested. You saw this was something even before the general election that I was adamant about, that she get out there and she register and that she vote. So you're seeing that shift in this generation, and I think it's going to continue. But you also see more minority women, someone like myself, businesswomen, people that have bared the burden for a lot of things, that wants to be a part of that change. And so that's really where it's at.
Absolutely. I definitely agree that this particular generation, you know, poses a different enigma, as it were, you know, in the overall struggle for liberation, because this is a generation which is so diametrically different and or opposed to the previous generations that we saw.
Yes,
The fight that our parents or our grandparents fought was quite different than what we're seeing now for more reasons than one. And I think
absolutely.
that one of the things in terms of media that I'm noticing, especially in light of the pandemic, uh, I personally think that to talk about vaccines for a moment, if vaccines are on the table as a means of alleviating the problem of COVID 19 or COVID in general, would you agree that more work should be done to educate the general public on what the actual vaccine contains or its possible side effects? Now, if you're at, as far as my personal opinion, I'm personally against vaccines, but I still want to be on record to simply ask you, do you think that more work should be done to at least educate the general public about a vaccine that's about to be mandated across the country?
Absolutely. And I think when people are given information that is accurate, obviously we have a very limited amount of time of what we're looking at. We've only had a year and less than a year to study the vaccine. So we're limited and we're asking people to take something that's very powerful. And so when we're already ambivalent about medical care and treatment, which is why this demographic was hit the hardest, we're behind the eight ball when we're talking about issuing something that could impact you for the rest of your life. So I think at minimum, as much information as you can share. And I know that people are adamant about being visible, about taking it. Celebrities, President Obama, and that's great. But it would still require as much information, studies as possible.
I
Sorry, can you
totally
hear me?
agree with you. Yes, I can hear you, and I totally agree with you. I think that if people are going to make a true, sound, and or viable decision in the direction of vaccines, we definitely have to be educated far greatly or far greater than what we are now. Now, they're simply telling the general public, these are the vaccines available, and then these are the dates that they'll be distributed, and you can now come up and have a vaccine. If you want to
Yes,
find out additional information about what the vaccine contains, you actually have to go out and do a rigorous research independently on your own, which again is problematic because how many people understand how to conduct research? Most of us went to college. Most of us know that there's rules involved when we talk about methodology. There's a method involved in even accruing information. The very idea or
absolutely.
the very concept of how we gather intelligence requires a certain or a significant methodology within itself. So,
And some sophistication to that, what you're reading. And not everyone has that medical wherewithal to understand even the studies that are being presented. And most often, you have doctors interpreting things for the patient and hoping that
yes.
that is information that is accurate. And so, if that reliance has always been on the physician to provide it for you, you're limited on having someone being able to research it and understand what they're looking at. And to your point, even know where to look.
Absolutely, absolutely. And moving forward, we're stepping into 2021, and a lot of people don't know if they're entering a Hollywood blockbuster movie. No one knows what's in store for 2021. But one of the things that I would say historically, and this is why I also chose to have the conversation with you. One of the things that I do know historically that has been an immense foundation for disproportionate urban communities and Black people and Latino people, moreover, is our faith and our trust in God. That plays a very, very important role in all of this. Uh, I wanted to ask you another question to segue. Um, in terms of economics, when we speak of urban economics, we're also aware that there are a lot of challenges. Many Black people and Latino people report that when they go to the banks and they try to get loans, that they're not given the same treatment. They're not given the same opportunities. And there have been many studies available to confirm that this is a fact. But I think for us, the idea is, even though the obstacle is there, the obstacle should not hinder you to the point where you give up and no longer want to be in the race. So I want you to speak to us about the power of economics and how we can actually use economics as leverage, as it were, to kind of even the slate.
It's such an important topic, and I raising three young daughters, and they're women. They're within 3 years. I'm an empty nester. Credit, understanding the foundation of your good name on an application levels the playing field. My dad would say, sometimes you walk into an environment and all you have is a good name. Understanding that, understanding the value of your score, frequently checking your score, leveraging it so that it has value on an application is so important. Sorry for my voice.
That's okay.
But
That's
that
okay.
is where it starts. It's where it starts. Is your name. Your name and your credit is the foundation for that.
I totally agree with you that our name and our credit is the foundation for number one, to be actually called or taken seriously in those situations, in those places, or in those spaces. So I totally agree on those points. However, I want to say overall, we are, I want to say, one of the biggest spenders in America. Black people collectively come together to spend, a little bit over 3.5 billion annually in America. Yet we don't have many institutions of our own. As a city councilwoman, if you were elected as a city councilwoman, what do you think would be some of the things that you'd be interested in trying to push or trying to develop in urban communities to kind of make it a fair playing field for everyone?
Sure. So a fair playing field starts with having the credibility to come to the table. I'm a Black business owner. And so understanding that as an owner of a company, I'm creating jobs, I'm creating opportunities, and I'm extending that resource to other people. And so being someone that is driven in that way and modeling it, those are a lot of hard steps that were taken to get to where I'm at now. But there's no shortcuts. To be honest and to state up front, that is grinding every day, rolling up your sleeves, positioning yourself, networking, being someone that has a good name, and not just as an individual in the community, but as a business owner.
Yes.
That is what is makes the difference when you come to a situation where you've never been in an arena, but you still have credibility. I could have never been on the ballot and received almost 14,000 votes as a first time runner and run only for 113 days and get over 14,000 votes. People had a
Mm,
very short amount of time to know me, but I had a
right.
good business name. That made a difference. And so for the next cycle, the next run, I've earned more credibility because
That's
after the
right.
campaign, when I didn't win, I didn't disappear. I started the podcast show, continued my championing the recovery for small businesses. I'm I'm stating and I'm laying the line in the sand that I'm here to stay, that I'm here to be a solution oriented council person. And if that's not in this cycle, it will be in the next cycle. So you're stating a position that you're not going to just disappear if the race doesn't go your way initially. There have been several council members who have run a few times before they actually got into the seat, and that's because they continue to pursue the seat. So that pursuit in between is a lot of work. It is taking the time to do things like I'm doing right now, and putting business owners out there in their plight, and of course opportunities like this to continue to have a platform. So you have to continue. You can't just one and done. I didn't get it, so I'll go away. You have
That's
to
a
keep fighting.
great point. That's a great point. As a black business owner, I would like to ask you this because we do have many black business owners in the country, even though it's not always highlighted in the media. Uh, how did you survive and or still thrive in the midst of COVID this year? Were there any challenges that you faced as a business owner during this time?
Absolutely. And some business owners weren't able to pay their invoices because their revenue was impacted. But it didn't change the need for them to have support. My challenges um, were less about not having business because human resources, everyone needed it in COVID because no one had an understanding of how to navigate it as an employer. So I actually got really busy, but it still required me to support those that weren't able to pay because they they will recover, and the only way to get through that recovery is to still have that infrastructure, which is what I support. So I found a balance with those that were thriving, like my third party Amazon client who tripled in business because that's what everybody was doing, was ordering everything on Amazon. And then of course my restaurant owners, they were giving grace on there. And that balance comes from just understanding that when I was a new business owner, they took a chance on me as being the right person for the job. And so I remembered all that, and they'll remember that later when they get back on their feet and they're able to pay their invoices. So the challenges were in different industries. Some could not pay, but then there was an opportunity for other um, clients to raise their invoice, and I was able to get through. And so I was very fortunate. But one thing I have to say is that I made myself essential, and that's why you saw the videos. That's why any information I had that I could extend to people on the PPP loans, unemployment, um, the shutdown, and even the stimulus. So I had to be creative, just like everyone else, to survive. And I made myself essential. I didn't wait for some entity to say, by the way, you could stay open, you're essential. I made sure I was essential. So it's important to reinvent yourself in situations where maybe you started off being one thing and then you have to be another because the times call for that. So my painting company, they started a disinfecting side and said, I'll disinfect, use the same skill set, but everyone has to disinfect their environments. And so that's what they did. So you have to be creative.
And that's beautiful. Speaking on reinventing yourself, I can certainly tell you that I can definitely attest to the idea that in the midst of COVID, with so many challenges facing people who go out in the workforce, you were almost forced to reinvent yourself.
Absolutely.
And this became, I want to say, the year 2019 has seen probably the hugest surgeons of online podcasters, yourself,
Right.
me,
Mm-hmm.
many others. Many of us may have had these ideas
Sure.
long before now, but with the pandemic, it created just the right climate and just the right impetus for people to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do it.
I'm
For
going to take that
myself, for
leap.
many.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Speaking for me, I'm an author. 5 times over, I've written 5 books. I'd like to write many more books, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a public speaker. I do a lot of public speaking, and one of the things I've always said in the last, I want to say 3 to 5 years, is I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to do a podcast, and it just so happens that COVID created the perfect climate to go out and fulfill something I already wanted to do. And to
And people
me,
were
that
seeking
almost,
that.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And to me, that speaks towards what you just said,
Yes.
reinventing yourself. Reinventing yourself is not so much about going back to the drawing board and erasing things.
No.
Sometimes reinventing yourself simply means to put aside the things that you really don't want to do and begin to manifest the things that are dear in your heart.
And
That's reinventing
refining
yourself.
what's already there. I didn't have to reinvent who I was when I went into politics. I was like you. I could speak publicly because that's what I did for my company, but the platform was just different. But it's still the same structure, same person,
Yes, it
different.
is.
Yeah. So it was an easy transition because
It
I had
most
a
def
foundation.
it most definitely is. Now, you know, I definitely could not skip this question. Tell us
Mhm.
about your experience with the Shark Tank.
Yes. So ironically, 5 days before the pandemic struck, I was doing a pre-audition because there was a point when Shark Tank was in California hosting their preliminary auditions. And as the state started to shut down, it became clear that this was going to have to be a video because they were going to limit face to face. And so I was submitting that. And then 5 days after we shot it, it was shut down. And so production was shut down. But then the immediate need to help employers was there because I had to give information about the PPP, what's next. And so that's been tabled because the production completely shut down. But I was ready to franchise 6 Degrees
Right.
as a company nationally. And I've always thought of 6 Degrees as a national company. And if you understand 6 Degrees, we're all connected by 6 people globally. So I wanted to create a company that was global. So that's the reason why
That's an
it's six
excellent
degrees.
point. I definitely was going to ask you, where did the concept 6 degrees come from within your
Yes.
consulting? And
Hmm.
you're saying that it comes from the saying 6 degrees of separation, how we're all
Correct.
connected ultimately.
We're all
Very, very
connected.
powerful.
Hmm.
Very, very powerful. What
Hmm.
are some of the services that you do offer?
So your infrastructure of your company.
That's okay. That's okay. It's okay. I actually have some tea here myself to help me out. So take your time. By the way, family, please share the live, share the live, family. Thumb up the video. We're having a really, really good conversation. It's a beautiful Friday evening for us here on the East Coast. Our sister is all the way in the West Coast. We're out in California. We won't be here too much longer. We have a little bit more time. If you guys have any questions for her, you can feel free to call in soon, as we are going to bring it to a close within, the
So
next half
sorry.
hour or so. Yes.
So
So,
sorry about that, you guys.
so that's
Dealing with
okay.
the golf.
That's okay.
Mhm. So
That's
what I
okay.
do is I develop the infrastructure. So I'm an HR specialist. So by my license, I have um, the credentials to assure that a company is compliant infrastructure wise, which is the reason why you hear in my videos a lot me saying you need to have your sexual harassment training, you need to have this, because these are the all the kind of best practices standards that every company that employees should have. And so it's very important that you again you take the time to earn the credentials that afford you the ability to say I'm an expert in the field. So that's what I am in terms of HR. So if you're a small company and you do not have HR, you have a lot of exposure, meaning liability exposure, because a lot of issues happen with employees because we're human beings. And that's where typically an employer has most difficulty in managing in their employees. So from their handbook to
That's
policies, everything.
That's great. That's great. As I look into my childhood and I consider, where I'm at now, I can hear faintly in my ears many of the wisdom that my mother and my father would bless me with over the years. My dad said to me many years ago, "What's the difference between someone who owns a corner store bodega and someone who owns a chain of supermarkets?" To which I ignorantly said, "I don't know. One has more money." And he says, "No,
Whatever they
it's
sell.
the size of their vision. One
Right.
person has one simple storefront, and that's all that they thought that they could do.
Yep.
Another person says, no, I'm not going to stop with this storefront. I am going to own a series of storefronts. So it's the size of our vision that can really produce the change that we want to see,
And my
right?
vision
For
was
instance,
always that 6 Degrees was going to be global. And that's the reason why I didn't name it Selena Thomas um, Enterprises, because I wanted the the concept of supporting small businesses as a franchise to be national, and that just as you see franchise companies for different types of supercuts, you see any kind of franchise that you could think of. Paul Davis Restoration, Domino's Pizza, they're all national franchises that are are brand names that you know immediately. I thought of 6 Degrees because that concept in a national level had not been presented, and everyone needs HR. We have 27.5 million small businesses in this country. That is the backbone of this country. And so in my brain, I said, who supports them? Because more often than not, you would not have someone internally that specialized in HR. You had someone that was doing payroll that was Google guessing the HR issues, and you can't do that. So it made sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as a business owner in America, and on top of that in California, you spoke of the fact that you're global. Give us a little substance behind that. When you say you're global or international, what are some of the
I wanted to be
countries
global.
outside of America that you're connected to?
Well, no, I'm not connected yet. The point of franchising on Shark Tank was to become global, but we hadn't gotten there
Oh,
yet.
okay. That's the
So
ultimate goal. That's the end goal,
correct.
per
Yes,
se.
that's the end
Okay,
goal. And what bigger platform
okay.
for
And
franchises or good ideas than most people connect to, which is Shark Tank. So for
yes,
me, it
yes.
made perfect sense. One of the franchises that one of the sharks actually launched is a company called Paycom, which does the payroll side of companies. And you see their national commercial everywhere. And it launched and it took a whole nother life.
Wow.
So
Now,
yes.
are your ideas protected? Your intellectual property? Do you have any patents?
So proprietary information is not best practices isn't covered under proprietary. So the idea is that a practitioner become the ideal franchisee because they have the credentials, and so the infrastructure that they would build would be based on their clients in their area. So certain franchises for 6 Degrees could be just for doctors' offices. When I started my company, I really grew because if you think of a doctor's office, one or two, maybe three employees in it, no room for an HR woman, but they need HR. So my doctor practice grew significantly because it made sense to have the doctor distance themselves from any HR related matters and use an outsourced company like myself. And so some people that own a 6 Degrees could franchise and specialize specifically just in working with small doctors' offices, dentists, doctors, internists. So the franchise concept is truly the franchisee can make it their own in terms of specializing in any specific area that they maybe have an expertise in already or are already rooted in. As I have a lot of specialists that I work with that's all they do is they work with accountants. That's all they do is work with law firms. So
And
each
while
franchisee can take it and make it their own.
and while this is very impressive, again, uh, I elected to ask you for this interview because I said to myself, here is someone who has proven results, or here is someone who is out in the workforce as an entrepreneur, doing what most would say is impossible, especially not for just Black people in a whole, but to take it even a step further, a Black woman. So I want to say this to you. I take my hat off to you.
Oh,
You
thank
know,
you.
I think your work is impressive. I haven't been following you for a long time, but I've been following you enough to see that you're really in it in your heart. Your heart is there, and that's where, to me, it truly counts. In our community, there is a divide as to, what should we put our trust in. There are some in our community that argue that we should be about building economics exclusively and putting religion to the back burner. So this question might be a little bit more personal, but I'm not
Hmm.
asking you to open up
Sure.
entirely about any details. But I want to ask you, how important of a role does your spiritual and or religious views play as a driving force for what you do?
Well, I think my foundation for everything that I do is in my ethics. And
Okay.
so some people choose to place all their ethics on their spiritual or their religion. But I think if
Hmm.
you have a foundation of ethics, all of that is the same. And so I have integrity about everything that I do. I
Mm,
have integrity about the clients even that I take. I not one to take a client that's saying, "Hey, how quickly can we take this shortcut?" That we're not for each other. And so ultimately everything that I do is about my integrity and my ethics. And so um, even in the hours that I work, most entrepreneurs work 12 to 14 hours of the 24 hours. It's just which hours in that day do they work. And so
right.
I have um, a work ethic that I learned from my father, who was in and of himself, a trailblazer. He was in the Air Force, uh, became an air traffic controller, and went on strike. Took his GI Bill, became a teacher, a principal, and then a superintendent. And so ultimately, watching that and watching his work ethic and how it was the driving force for everything. It was very easy for me to emulate that and have that. It's literally woven into my fiber. So
That's
everything
that's
about what I do is about integrity.
that's beautiful. My closing thoughts for you: are there any tools, resources, or even books that you would recommend to help many in urban communities to get started with a more business mindset? Most of us realize that true accomplishment in this country is really in ownership, right? Like that's where
Mhm.
you're really the captain of your ship per se. So, what are some of the tools, resources, and/or books that you would possibly share with us in closing to help galvanize or drive us further in wanting to go the route of becoming an entrepreneur?
I think that's such a great question, and I truly I look to other successful people. I believe that we all create an energy where like attracts like, and we're always drawn to people that ultimately share our same story, different journey. And so you can look around you in your community for those that are successful and go towards them. This is the reason why networking with your chamber is important, being visible and present and active in city council meetings, even if you're a community leader. We have a lot of community leaders here that just want to play that role as a a visible participant, but not necessarily a council person. Those are the people that I recommend anyone, because it's specific to your community and certainly specific to the dynamics of your community. I live in a suburban area, so me presenting to people living in an urban area, something that is works for me here, would be disingenuous. But I think ultimately, to the young councilman that you're going to be interviewing next week, I recommend anyone in his community go towards him. What was his driving force? What was his formula for success? And then make it your own. I mean, I what I'm writing was unwritten, in the sense of there's never been an African American woman to run in my community for the seat. Um, I am the only African American uh, uh, firm of my type here in this community, but I'm not an African American business owner. I'm a business owner that happens to be African American. And that's
Okay.
how I stated it when I was a city council candidate as well. But I think there's so many things that are around you that you just look towards it and it would make sense.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Well, I want to say a thank you. It was short of time that I came to you and
Of
asked you
course.
to join us and have this conversation. I
Oh, I
benefited
appreciate
from
it.
it, and I'm sure many who are going to watch this are going to benefit from it. So I want to say thank you at this time. Thank you so very
Thank
much,
you.
and much success to you. And if it does come about that you do have another chance, another go around with the Shark Tank,
I am.
please let us know. We'd love to hear about that.
And for city council. I'll definitely keep you posted on that.
That's right, definitely. And you know what? When I interview Jules Jones next week, who is a city councilman at the moment, he's actually at the state capitol right now doing something in DC. So he's going to come on either Monday or Wednesday of next week. If I can get availability for you, I would love to have you
meet him.
join the panel with him so that you two can dialogue and that we can really have a more developed conversation about politics in urban communities and how we can come out and mesh the two.
Absolutely. And I'm inspired by him and that he won and he's going to be doing great things. So I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much and have a great night. All right. God bless.
Happy holidays.
God bless.